Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal, the podcast on grief, loss, and food. I'm your host, Andrew. Every episode, I talk with a guest about the grief of someone special framed around the foods and meals that meant the most to them. This week, I spoke with Coach B about her grandmother. I feel like I say this a lot, but I enjoyed speaking with her so much. She is incredibly kind, funny, and above all else, I could really feel the love that she has for her family, and that's just so beautiful. This was fun is a hard word to use in this instance, but I really did enjoy this conversation because it is so deep and meaningful. But speaking with her about such a sensitive subject just really goes into what I've noticed through so many of these conversations, that this isn't a sad thing. You know, grief is inherently sad, but there's also a lot of levity that comes up with talking about a loved one, because there are funny stories to tell, there are fun anecdotes to share. You know, there's just this chance to stop and think about someone you care about and remember them in a positive way, and there's something really powerful in talking about that. So I'm really appreciative of her for coming on, opening up, and just sharing her story. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Before we go in, I do just want to say, if you're not already following on social media or following the podcast, please do so. I link to social media in all of the show notes. It's Our Last Meal Pod, and any kind of exposure helps. If you're not following the podcast, I would love it if you would. If you would share it with someone, if you would leave a rating, any amount of stars, and some kind of write-up of what you like about it. This is a labor of love. I'm not doing this for profit. This is something I'm doing because I think there is benefit in people talking about their stories. So I would appreciate you helping share the word any way you can. And now let's jump into the show. I always do like to give a content warning at the top. This show does talk about death, so please be mindful as you listen. Make sure you're in a good headspace to hear this conversation. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal. I'm your host, Andrew, and my guest this week is spiritual life coach, Reiki practitioner, and owner of The Full Embrace, Coach B. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I am very appreciative of the consideration, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
I am too. I won't call out our employer, but I heard a little bit about your story a few weeks ago at work, and just hearing you speak was so moving. And I'll be honest, as soon as you got done, I was like, I need to reach out to her, because it was almost like you put it together specifically around this topic, and I had to touch base with you.
Absolutely. I definitely, once I heard about your podcast, I definitely felt like it was totally in alignment with kind of my story as well. So I feel like it was definitely meant to be.
Uh, it's it's kind of reassuring. This may sound weird, but it is reassuring in a way to know that other people have like the same kind of connection I do, or that connect these same things around people we care about and the foods that they enjoyed and that we enjoyed with them. And not in a way that I had to bring up the conversation, but they they brought it up themselves. That's always very, very nice to know that. Okay, that gives me some sense that this is a valid idea. So thank you for validating me.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the podcast, we do like to jump in and talk about loved ones, grief, the grief process, but also talk about food. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Can you share with us who you'll be talking about?
Yes, I will be speaking about my grandmother. She's my paternal grandmother, and her name is Shirley Ann Lynn. And I can't wait to get into her story and how important she has impacted my life, how importantly she has impacted my life.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say this, even as you said her name, and just I could just see you light up.
Yes, absolutely.
Grandmother
Definitely.
Grandmothers have that they have that effect on us, don't they?
Yes, for sure. Two peas in a pod, for sure.
So, okay, talk to me about that. You said two peas in a pod. I mean, I know that the two of you were close, but could you tell me a little more about that?
Sure. So before I was born, my grandfather passed away a couple of months, just a few months before I was born, and they were really close. And so my grandmother was actually grieving at the time of my birth, and my parents had me fairly young, and so I spent a lot of time while they were working with her. And so we really bonded at that time because I feel like we both kind of needed each other. Like I needed, a caretaker, obviously, but
Yeah,
I feel like I really helped her with her grief with my grandfather because, I slept in the bed with her. So I was kind of like there to kind of like put her focus in, on helping with me and taking her mind off of her grief with my grandfather.
yeah.
And so she kept me a lot. I did, to my knowledge, I don't remember this, but I know I lived with her for a couple of months when I was like 2 years old. But she was definitely, I was there every weekend and every summer up until, my teenage years. I even lived with her in high school for some time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. I think when I think about birthdays, like I was always, my birthday's in the summer, so like every day on my birthday, I would wake up at her house and she would make me breakfast and get me ready. And so, so much of me is my grandmother for sure.
That is awesome. Now, I know you said that you came at a time that it sounds like she really needed you too, like you said. Uh,
Hmm.
did she ever share anything as you were growing up or talk to you about how important it was for her during that time?
um no, I don't. My grandmother was very much she was a very present person.
Yeah.
And so she definitely reflected a lot on things, but she wasn't really she wasn't reflective, and I think it's just a testament to like that time, in that time frame of how people were back then.
Yeah.
But she really didn't really get into her feelings a lot, but she did talk about my grandfather all the time. And, I would ask her, I was very curious. So I would always ask her about him and, how things were then. And so she definitely told me a lot about it. But I would say the closest thing that I received in that would be when I graduated high school. She told me that, she raised me as her child. She did not raise me like a grandchild. And so I think that really spoke to how she felt about me and, in that time. So, because she had 19 grandchildren. I don't know if I
Wow.
mentioned that. And I'm in the center. I'm kind of like in the middle end. So we range from my brother's 13, and the oldest is about 47, I think.
Oh,
So
wow.
and I'm 33. So, you know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
a
big
spectrum.
deal. For sure. For sure.
It's interesting you mentioned that she was very present. I think I think that is something of the older generation. You know, my grandparents were the same way. They would talk about the past sometimes, but I think I've learned more. My grandfather passed 2 years ago, and I think I've learned more about his early life since he passed than I ever did growing up. You know,
Yeah,
he didn't dwell. He was more focused on the present too, and on on the future and being prepared for it, which I'm sure is because of the past.
absolutely. For sure. Yes. I think I would have to, I totally agree with that. I've asked a lot around, like when she passed and, just learning. I didn't really know much about the aspect of like her relationship with my grandfather. So apparently they grew up together. They were like each other's like high school sweethearts. They well really
Really?
like they met in like since they were kids. They always lived in the same on the same road. And so they were always together, and I never knew that until after she passed. And so first, yeah, I to definitely understand that.
That's beautiful. You don't hear much of that anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
So so you said that they were high school sweethearts. Um, what have you learned about them? Since her passing. I know you said you learned more about that.
So I have gone back and I've gone to I've been really heavy into ancestry.com lately. It's addictive.
Yeah, it is. It
My
is.
boyfriend's like, they made it that way on purpose. um, I have gone and I found their marriage license. I found, you know, I've gone. So they had 8 children and seven survived. I guess one died at
Mm.
birth, and I've gone and asked a lot of different questions about like how it was growing up, and they recently sold their house, and so just learning about like my grandfather built that house for $14,000,
Oh
and
wow.
just yeah, so just kind of like learning and how they acquired the land, and just different things about. Um, where they hung out, and that wasn't the first house that they had, and so my father is the youngest of the 8, and he was a fire starter. um
Is
so
that
he
why they had to build the second house?
yes, that is why he
For
my
legal purposes, this is a joke, right?
right, yes, absolutely. He allegedly like his sister didn't make him a bowl of cereal, so he caught a room on fire. And so yeah, she got out pretty quickly.
Uh,
But the house wasn't, yeah, they had to move. So
so the in his defense, I guess it depends on what kind of cereal it was. If it was like
very
just plain
true.
Cheerios, and I think it was an overreaction. If it was like
Yes,
Fruit Loops or Honey Nut Cheerios, I can kind of see where he's coming from.
for sure. I don't think that it was either of those because we grew up eating cornflakes and I hated
Oh,
cornflakes. It's like frosted flakes without the sugar, and you have to have a bunch of sugar. So
you just took me back to my childhood eating plain Cheerios, but having to put sugar on it just to make it taste somewhat decent.
yes, you have
Um,
all the sugar in the
yeah, I okay. So this makes me feel better that I was because I would if I had to sit down and eat Cheerios, I would put sugar on it. And in hindsight, it's like okay, it completely it's like putting ranch dressing all over a salad. It completely defeats the purpose. It is, but I guess if it gets you to eat something somewhat healthy, I guess.
Yeah. It's kind of like it cancels each other out.
Well, okay, so I guess at that point though, it's net zero, right? I mean, if it
Yes.
so that technically, I think that's still probably healthy ish.
It is. Yeah. I like that perspective. That's very optimistic.
I'm gonna go the optimistic route.
I like
Um,
that. I like that.
I I love that you mentioned too that you've been doing ancestry. I've done some of that too, and it is. I'd love for you to talk to me about your experience with it, but for me, it has been so interesting. You know, getting to see old pictures and just like you mentioned the marriage license, getting to see those documents is so. It's amazing because it kind of it made me feel closer to them.
Yes, for sure. I found my grandfather's draft card.
Oh
He
wow.
was, I think he was in the Vietnam War, and he was a
Mm.
cook. He was a cook in the service, and so just seeing that, it's been awesome. I think when I first started Ancestry.com or the Ancestry, it was when my grandmother passed, and then I've picked it up since like very recently. This year, I'm trying to be more intentional about family,
Yeah.
and I've started like a family group because I come from a very big family. It's very, very huge family. Like if you think about like your typical Southern family,
Yeah.
um, we are from Friendship, North Carolina. It's in the Buckhorn municipality of like the Raleigh Durham area, but it's more like Apex, Cary, if you're familiar with RTP.
Yeah.
And we founded friendship. My family did. And
Oh
so it's
wow.
been interesting to just, I have found my ancestors to like the 1600s, like when they came here from Britain,
That
and
is
just to
amazing.
see, yes, their migration and, to just to track everything back. And it's been like mind blowing just to kind of see things and um just the senses of like who lived in the house and who lived together. And I come from really they were farmers back then, and we had a bunch of land. And so just it's been awesome. I did also find out that a lot of my family mixed in with each other.
Really. Hey, that
So
well look, I'm there's no judgment because looking back, you're gonna run into some stuff, you
yes,
know?
yes.
Um and like I'm just gonna this isn't even me trying to be funny or trying to just, say something to make you feel better. I don't think there's anybody that could look back more than a couple decades and not find something that you're embarrassed about or that's like you have to side eye a bit. I know I've heard some of those. Um, yeah, I'm no judgment.
Yes, it's okay. I've it's a it's almost like a rumor that was kind of like around town my whole life, so it's something that I've always kind of heard about. But
Yeah.
to see it with my own eyes, I think I have like three sets of the same grandparents.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean it is kind of cool though. Like I guess hearing like a that rumor or like that. Oh, you've always heard so and so, right? And then you get to go verify it. It's like okay, we solved that one.
Yes, yes. So I think it's great to just know your family, and I've met a lot of new family members.
Yeah,
And just to, I think there's something about meeting a new family member because it's like you automatically love them. You don't really understand why you should,
you just
but
do.
it's like, yes, it's been great. It's been a wonderful experience for me.
It is. I'm glad you said that. I don't think I think about that often, but it is true. My daughter is 6, and every time we mention a cousin, my wife's cousin is he's here for a couple months. He's visiting from Honduras, and so
Oh,
he's staying with my in laws. He's working with them a little bit and just just hanging out before he starts college. Well, she got to meet him for the first time a week or two ago, and I told her a few days before that you're going to meet your cousin this weekend, and she just started asking me 100 questions. Who is he? How tall is he? Is he older than you? Is he older than mommy? Is he younger than you? And she just immediately is enthralled by this idea of like this is a new person to me, but they're family, and so I'm all in. And I love that, and it's always cool to me to get to see her get so excited to find out that even if it's a distant, I could tell her that she's got a distant third cousin 3 times removed, and she'd be like, "Cool, I want to know all about them."
oh, I love that. That's awesome. I have cousins in Honduras.
Really?
Yes, my grandfather's from Honduras.
See, right? There's always connections. This is what another thing I love. When you get a chance to talk to people, you're always going to be able to find some type of connection, and it's going to be the most random thing.
Yes, it is.
So she's got family from Honduras and from Nicaragua.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
no, it's just that's really cool though.
Yes.
I like what you said too about being able to go back and like touch the documents. When you said that, it made me think about so last week I got to go visit my aunt, and I got a few things from her house that had belonged to my grandparents. My grandmother just passed away a few months ago. I actually got a couple of her cookbooks, and so I've got cookbooks now that she used 30, 40 years ago, some handwritten things in there, so it actually she called out a couple recipes that she liked. So I'm looking forward to getting to go back and make some of those because it's just that feeling of connection to that
Yes.
person.
Yes. For sure. I agree. That's wonderful. I can only can definitely imagine like how great that's going to be. Like whenever
Yeah.
I cook, I definitely channel my grandmother every time. Like it's just something about it because I think, well, she taught me how to cook. She taught me how to
Yeah.
spend hours and hours and hours just in front of, she had a kitchen. Like her kitchen was like kind of like boxed in, and like she had like this I don't know if it was like a table. It was kind of like an island, but it doesn't like a regular. It was like more like a peninsula. I'll say that because it kind of came in and it was like a I don't know, like a almost like a square shaped kitchen, and she had like
Yeah.
these bar stools, and she would make all her cakes there, and she would make her potato salad, and she would let me like the cake, the bowl, and so I just would spend so much hours and hours and hours of watching that and trying to learn those recipes. So
Yeah.
she doesn't have any written recipes, so everything that I make is by memory. So I am so like that's awesome that you have that and you're able to even just to see her handwriting and just feel that and touch that is awesome.
And that's the thing. The recipes in there, I'll be honest, it's not stuff that I remember her making as a kid. I
Okay.
wish it was, but she was very much the same way that, if you asked her how do you make I asked her one time, how do you make cornbread? And for anyone who listens to this show, you heard me talk about her cornbread a dozen times at least. I asked her one time a few years ago, before her memory started to decline, and
Hmm.
she tried to explain it to me, but it was very much a, well, you just put some of this in there and then some of this, and just make sure it looks right, and you fry it until it's done. It's like that's only from experience, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm. That sounds like my grandmother.
Yeah. you so you kind of gave the best possible segue there. So you talked about, you learned to cook from her and from watching her, and
Hmm.
even now you channel her.
Hmm.
What kind of foods, when you think about the foods that she made and that you associate with her, what kind of foods was that?
Definitely soul food. Like, I am vegan. I've been vegan for 6 years. So I've had to go back and veganize everything that I'm used to eating.
Yeah,
It's a lot better today than it was when I was vegan.
it's improved with time.
Yes. But I love like just I love baking. So something that I started off was baking. I love to bake, and it's something that I used to really think about. I was always a better baker, but like as I've gotten older, I've started to try different things. But definitely soul food, like just and soups and just like hearty things, like comfort food. Anytime I'm making comfort food, I definitely try to channel her, especially when I'm cooking for people
Yeah,
because she was very big on that. We used to have, Sunday dinner at her house. We went to her house for holidays. She always cooked way too much food for everyone. And if she knew typical grandmother, like if she knew you were coming, she was going to make all your favorites.
yeah.
And so I definitely try to match her in terms of like the amount of food she cooks, and I definitely try to. I think I've picked up that nourishing component that she has of just making sure that everyone's fed, everyone's comfortable.
Yeah.
I love cooking for people. I think, and I definitely get that from her, like for sure.
When and the way you said that too was it. I know you said that she liked to cook for people and she would have people over regularly, but it didn't sound so much like just like, oh, she just liked to host, but the way you said the word nourishing,
Hmm. She's a
because to me
mom.
that's the thing, because nourishing to me is so much more than just, I'm just going to put some food on your plate. It's just this warmth and this welcomeness or
Hmm.
welcoming, and that's the sense I got when you said that.
Definitely, definitely. Yes, my grandmother. So something interesting about her is not only did she have a lot of kids and grandchildren and great grands, She had
Yeah.
about 20 first cousins. So it was like 20 of them.
Oh
Maybe
wow.
more, but to my knowledge, it's about 20 that's coming to mind. And they were close, like siblings. All of them were
Yeah.
like, they lived in Friendship, and Friendship didn't have a stoplight when I was growing up. So it was literally like 3 or 4 roads. They didn't have any like they had a little corner store. They didn't have any, like, you had to go to Apex. You had to go to the next town to do anything. So it was all of these cousins that grew up together, and they would make ice cream together. And so they had, they had when they had children and grandchildren, it was just like a bunch of grandparents. So
Yeah.
when I was coming up, it was a bunch of grandparents. So my grandmother and her cousins were like extended grandparents for me. So my grandmother was definitely a mom. Like, she was very active in church. And so she was like a church mom. She was a community mom. And she was definitely that way. Like, if you were sick, she took care of everyone, and she made soup, and she did all of the things. And if you were celebrating something, she went over the top, and she always made your plate, or she always saved you a plate, and she always made sure like you were well fed. And that was just definitely one of my favorite things about her, for sure.
You weren't going to go away hungry.
Oh no. Oh no, I have this memory that comes to mind is I was picky. I was a very picky eater, and I never finished my pancakes, and I didn't like syrup. I was not like, I like plain food. Like, I just can eat the pancakes plain. And
You ate dry pancakes?
I did not
I'm
anymore, but when I was a kid, for sure.
okay. I was gonna say I was afraid I was gonna have to cut this off and just be done.
I think it was because she put a lot of syrup. I don't like a lot of rich things. Well,
Fair,
back then I
fair.
didn't. I didn't like I had a very simple palate. And I just remember she had a very traditional, like, there's this plate that it's very common in the South, but it's like a blue plate, and it has like these hand drawn stars on it. And I just have these memories of her like taking the fork with the piece of pancake and just rubbing it in all of the syrup, and like, eat your food. You gotta eat. You're gonna be hungry later. And I'm like, oh. Um, but yeah, she
And,
definitely
and
made
I was
sure.
gonna say, was it actual maple syrup or was it like the Cairo syrup? Because that's I grew up on Cairo, like just, and for anyone who doesn't know, that is pure corn syrup. It is. I haven't had any in years, and I would never eat it now because it is just, it's hyper processed sugar. But
Mhm.
I can, if that's what it was, I could understand why you didn't like it.
And it was maple syrup. It was maple
Okay,
syrup. Yeah. She was the same way with molasses though. So yeah.
fair. Okay, I guess I can give you a pass on the dry pancakes. But you said you've adapted now that you're older.
Yes, I've adapted for sure. Not as much syrup, but definitely enough to coat it.
Yeah, and see, and I think that's reasonable. You want to know that there's a pancake in there. You just want it to be swimming, but something to add to it. I'm with you on that.
All right. She made the pancakes with the crispy edges, and it's like, if they're not crispy anymore.
So you still like them the same way that she did them with the crispy edges?
Oh yes, for sure. I feel like I haven't had any. I think I've had maybe since she's passed. And honestly, I live in Charlotte and she lived in Raleigh, so I haven't had her. I didn't had her pancakes in over a decade, probably. So I
Yeah,
think I've only had pancakes close to hers one time since then. So
it's hard to replicate some of that. Because it's not just in the recipe. There's something that they do special to it.
yes, I can't do it. I've tried. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about it.
I It's funny. I've heard that from almost everyone who's been on the show. Whenever we talk about foods that they associate with it, foods that they associate with the person that they were, that they lost, foods that they made. There's always that I tried to replicate it. I've gotten kind of close, or I've never gotten even remotely close, but they've never been able to duplicate it.
Hmm.
I've never had anyone that could really duplicate that thing.
Yes, I don't feel. that bad about it, and here's why. My grandmother told me, so I mentioned that my grandfather was a cook, and
Yeah.
she told me that he was a better cook than she was. So he cooked a lot, and she said that he had the best fried chicken.
Really?
And, this is a long time ago. But he used to fry it with like, or double fry it in like lard
Yeah, I
and
believe that.
different things. And he didn't rush his chicken, and so she could never duplicate his chicken. And she said, I tried, and he used to always tell me that I rush my chicken, and that's why it doesn't come out the way his does, or his did. And I grew up with listening to that story pretty often, so like I've just accepted, like, okay, well, you know it's just not my, it's not my thing. But yeah, for
There's just certain
sure.
things. It's it's funny you mentioned that though, that you still like the pancakes with the burnt edges, because I just realized something the other day. Again, I'll go back to my grandmother's cornbread. She didn't make a sweet cornbread, so there's some people that love sweet cornbread, some people that like savory. I
Hmm.
would much rather have savory. I don't like sweet cornbread. I
I
never thought about this. She was diabetic, so she didn't add sugar to her cornbread.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's why I'm almost 36, and I cannot stand sweet cornbread, because hers is the bar for me.
Hmm.
That is what I compare everything to, and nothing's ever compared to it. But when talking with my aunt last week, it was very much yeah, she did, and she just kind of told me, was like, why her cornbread wasn't sweet, right? It's because she was diabetic. I've known that my entire life, never made the connection that that's
Right.
why hers wasn't sweet. And so it's this little thing, and that still has an impact on me. And it's, for you, the pancakes, that you still have to have the crispy edges on them.
Yes, but also my grandmother made like those pan fried, like I don't know the term for it, but the cornbread, like,
The
you
hoe
just kind of
cakes.
pan fried. Yeah, they're like
Oh
little, like you put them in the cast iron, but it's not like
yeah,
yeah. Um, I think it's called hot water cornbread. I think it's
I've
what
heard
it's
hot
called.
water. I've heard hoe cakes. But I know what you mean on that fried cornbread, and it's got to be
Mhm.
done in cast iron.
Yes, she made that every day, and so it
Oh,
was always some on the table. It was always some in the microwave. Every single, I can't name a time where she didn't have it. She had that, and she always had fatback. Those are the
yeah.
two things that was always there. Like you had snack. That was like the snack in between meals. And um, I've only had that one time. Her daughter, my aunt, makes it sometimes, and I was like, and she makes it very similar to the way my grandmother did. And I tried. I almost burned my kitchen down. I just tried.
Yeah.
It was a disaster.
I I'm not good at frying anything that's not like a quick pan fry. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then I too, I don't think about, sometimes I don't put two and two together. I got these. This is completely not related, I'll admit that, but I got these sausages at a farmer's market last year. My wife and daughter and I went there, and I got really excited because they were ghost pepper sausages, and
Ooh.
I love spicy food. And so I was like, I'm gonna just fry some up one day. I didn't stop to think that, frying something with ghost pepper in it is going to give off smoke. And yeah, I can, you're, the smoke was spicy. I gassed our entire house essentially, um, with ghost pepper smoke. So I didn't almost burn it down, but we did have to open almost every window, and they were both coughing, and yeah, not
How
my
was the
proudest moment.
eyes? I can only like imagine like
So thankfully the eyes weren't too bad.
okay.
But I had to put on a brave face, like it's not that bad, and then I'm trying to like force back any cough that might be there, because I'm like, I don't want to give an inch here, because if I give an inch, then I have to admit I was wrong, and I'm not doing that.
You're like, I can imagine you're like trying to like really focus on your words and choose your words.
Yeah. So he's like, it's not that bad. It's really, y'all are making it bigger than it is, really. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah,
lesson learned.
yeah.
Lesson learned.
I understand that. That's how I feel about me. I just haven't mastered the cast iron pan. I just have
It's
not.
it takes practice. It's almost it's intimidating though, right?
It is. It's very intimidating. I don't care what I try to do. I've tried so many different things. I've overcooked steaks. I have burnt cornbread. I've burnt mushrooms. I've burnt pancakes. Like the whole thing, like the edges weren't just crispy. It was just a crisp cake.
So well, the edges were crispy. It's just so was everything else.
Everything. That was when I needed all of the extra syrup.
So the way I try to tell my wife is if I burn, it's not burnt, it's Cajun style. It's
Oh,
blackened. You know.
I like that.
Um, yeah, it's. I'm full of crap, but I mean, you really you sometimes you just have to try to play it off. It's all about how you brand it. You
I like
know.
that. I like
So
that.
they're not burnt pancakes; they're just Cajun pancakes.
Cajun. I like that. I'm gonna use that the next time I burn something for sure.
Yeah. So just don't you don't have to credit me, but feel free to take that one and use it.
Okay.
Um, so I know you said I am kind of interested in this. I know you said that you've tried to veganize some of her recipes.
Hmm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what that process has been like? Because it's I know it's that I know going vegan is there are a lot of reasons I'm sure for health, for moral reasons, all of that. And trying to tie it back to something that is so core to who you are, like those foods you grew up with. What has that been like for you?
A couple things there. Um, so I decided to go vegan. It was I love animals. I'm a huge cat lady. My cat is in his cat bed over there.
Got two
Um,
downstairs. So.
so I love animals first, but I went through like a really big grief storm um, that started before my grandmother passed, maybe like a year and a half before my grandmother passed. Her son passed away, and then like I just had a whole host of cousins and aunts and uncles pass away. And
Yeah.
I mentioned that my grandmother had like 20 first cousins, and they have all there's only like maybe 5 left out of 20, and they've all passed from
Mm.
cancer. And so I it's really a humbling experience to watch people, go through that experience of, deteriorating their health with
Yeah.
cancer. And I watched my uncle very closely, and then I was there when my grandmother passed. And I just was like, at the time I was really questioning a lot, and I was like, I don't want this to be me. And if there's any way that I can like prevent this from happening, I, I want to, I definitely want to do all that I can. So I started researching food, and I decided I just want to be, make different decisions.
Yeah.
Um, so when I decided to be vegan, it was her last year. I remember coming home from Thanksgiving. I was vegan maybe 3 months. I lost 30 pounds in three
Oh
months
wow.
because I did it all wrong.
It's a learning process.
Learning from yes, I ate a bunch of cabbage, and cabbage does not have calories in it, much calories in it. It's basically water.
But it's so good though.
It is really good. So, great detox. When people ask me how to lose weight, that is the one thing I tell them to do. It works. Trust me. So imagine I'm coming home to my family, and everyone was like,
They're
oh my
worried.
gosh, what's going on with
Yeah.
you? Are you having like, what's going on? But it was my first time doing Thanksgiving vegan. It was my first time trying recipes. And my grandmother makes sweet potato pies for me every year for Thanksgiving. She always makes me one, like
Yeah.
specifically. And so I made a purple sweet potato pie, and she tried it and she liked it.
How how much did that mean to you though? Not even
Oh my
just that she liked
goodness.
it. Not even
Oh,
necessarily that she liked it. Because I'm of the opinion, I do eat meat, but I am of the opinion that vegetables are good. And anyone, this like the anti-vegan, anti-vegetarian, it's ridiculous. If you don't like vegetables, it's because you haven't tried them done properly.
Right.
And I'm going to get
Abs-
off my soapbox. But
Absolutely. I agree with
I,
that. I approve that message.
I, because again, I'm sorry, vegetables are tasty. They
They
just are.
are.
If you
They
boil them till they have no flavor, then they're gross. But that's not how you should eat them anyway.
Absolutely. I agree. Um, it meant everything to me because it's the only thing I've ever made. That was the only time she's ever tried my cooking.
Yeah,
So it was a big deal. My other grandmother did not like it because I let them both try it. But that one that it really was important to me. And but I would say like just in learning how to veganize things, I'm getting better with time.
yeah,
And I think for like a good year, like I I feel like the journey of grief is like, it ebbs and it flows.
yeah,
It's peaks and valleys. And I hit like from my birthday in August till about October, really the holiday season, like I would say like third and fourth quarter of the year, late third and fourth quarter of the year. I am a little depressed,
yeah,
because I'm thinking about my grandma. The holidays are coming up. Um, so I've kind of gone like a couple of years like not wanting to celebrate, but I do find the courage to cook. And when I cook and I make things and I try my best to do things, I enjoy it so much. Like I just tried my first time making potato salad at a cookout a couple of weeks ago.
yeah.
It was a hit. Only thing I did, it was a hit. I'm so proud. I almost like want to make you some for you to some to work. Uh,
You should be proud of that.
it was everyone loved it, and I used her recipe. I've seen her make it so many times, and um, only thing I didn't have was egg in it. I did
Yeah.
vegan, everything else, and it was delicious. And my friend who's a celebrity vegan chef, she couldn't stop eating it, and I was like, oh, I'm on to something. If my grandmother was here, like she would love this. So I think like with being vegan, I approach it like this. I'm never gonna be my grandmother, but I am a part of my grandmother.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, she embraced me to be who I am. Like she was very, she pushed me to be, myself. And so when I cook, I've tried to make her recipes my own. Like even how she makes greens, I can't make. No one knows how she makes her greens. That's like just a lost thing that will never taste again. Um, but I make really great greens now, and
Yeah.
it's been something that I've worked on. But I think like I have so much joy in making them and just being open and experimenting, and it reminds me of her so much that it's like so gratifying just to even do that, for sure.
And see, that's the thing. I'm going to touch on a few things you said there because I love it. This idea that you don't have to be her, or you don't have to live up to some standard, because that standard, I'm sure, is something that. And I'm not calling you out. This is going to sound like I'm calling you out. I'm not. This is, I think, a very common thing. It's a standard that you've created, right? But it sounds like you've kind of learned that you don't have to live up to that.
Hmm.
You don't have to make something exactly the way she did, or that, because she is a part of you, you are a part of her. That's so beautiful that, because again, this goes back to a few weeks ago, hearing you talk about her today. I mean, it's clear that love and that bond, and just
Oh,
knowing that, okay, it lives on in you, right?
hmm. Yes, for sure. I think also why I when my grandmother was here, I always knew we were really close. Like I'm the favorite. Like it's undeniable. Everyone else says you're the favorite. Um, but I think that I didn't realize, like, when you're in the middle of something, you can't, sometimes you have to kind of have that
Yeah.
outside perspective and kind of see things from a different way. But when she passed, I didn't realize how much of me was her. And just that journey of reconciling that, what is me, what is her, like, how do I want to be now? Because when you lose someone, you'll never be the same person.
Yeah.
And so, like, deciding and really sitting with that during my grief journey and deciding what parts of her I want to be and I want to take with me, and I can remix and, you know, move around, and I can still, be as much of her and as much of me as I want to. And I think that's just been very beautiful and special as well.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think also just seeing it helps me when I miss her to see her in me and in my cousins and my, my aunts and my uncles and my dad. So yeah, for sure.
I think that's a really that's a great way to look at it. Is you can pick and choose because no one is perfect, right?
Hmm.
I think we have a tendency to, I don't know if idolize is the right word, but we put people on a pedestal when we've lost them, you know. But everybody's got the things that are amazing. Everybody has their faults. Everybody's got something that, even if it's not a fault, that we may not agree with. But this idea that you can take the pieces that that mean the most to you and that really resonate with you and make that a part of you, but still be your own person. I love that so much. Um, I also want to ask, you mentioned this, the grief journey. I know that this wasn't a simple thing for you. I got the spoiler on this, I guess. I know that hasn't been the simplest thing, but can you talk more about what your journey's been like, just through the grieving process? Because I know that's been a big part of, you know, who you are.
Yes, for sure. So I would say it's a little bit before my grandmother passed away. So I shut down typically when I was younger. I would shut down because I couldn't, like, my grandmother is like super strong. I've seen her, chop heads off of snakes and kill spiders. And, I've seen her just this, very strong woman. So whenever she would get sick, it would, like, I didn't know how to handle it. I remember when I
Yeah,
was in high school, when I was in middle school, she had surgery on, like, her spinal cord. She had to get, like, something removed, and then she
yeah,
broke her leg when I was in high school, and I did not know how to, like, they didn't even ask me to help take care of her because I just couldn't, like, I just,
yeah,
just visiting her in the hospital was super hard for me. So when my uncle got sick, and I first started going through this grief journey, because at the same time my step grandfather was dying of prostate cancer. My uncle
mm,
had prostate cancer. My grandmother had just got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had maybe like two or three other cousins with cancer at the time. Um, so I was very numb up until the point where she passed. So
yeah,
I grew up, and the reason why is because I kind of learned how to shut down my feelings about death, because my grandmother loved to, like, go to funerals.
So
It sounds super weird, but she, like, would look in the obituary, like, I don't know what it's called. I guess it's the obituary section of, like, the newspaper.
yeah,
And we have, like, a community, like, funeral home, and
yeah,
we know, like, the owners because they buried all the family. So she would go and she would look at the body when she would find out someone would pass. And so I grew up going to see the body, and, oh, they look good, and, like, kind of like almost judging the job they did on the body, and going to the funerals and cooking for the funerals, and, bringing food. And so I grew up doing that. So, it was a very natural part of me. I've almost groomed to do it. So
yeah,
when everyone else was passing, I was very much up to the task because I was used to doing it. But when my grandmother passed, I helped plan her funeral and I did a great job. I felt like I didn't cry at her
Yeah.
funeral. I was very supportive of everyone. You know, I had to tell everyone she died. You know, when I found her, you know, she died when I was there. So I had to tell all the kids and, you know, go through that. And I was very, you know, I don't want to say, I think now in hindsight is, I don't categorize it as very good, but I held it together. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did learn is my grandmother helped me to prepare for death, people's passing, but not the loss of people. And
Mm.
when she ended up passing, I would say like 2 weeks in, I like completely just lost myself. Like I can't pinpoint the night or the moment, but I just remember like nothing, like almost like, you know how like you get cut and you cut yourself and it's like, you know you're cut, but like when you look at your cut, it becomes more real and it starts to hurt.
Yeah. You
Like,
can't feel it until you see it.
right. And I feel like all of a sudden it was like I finally saw my cut and my finger was hanging off type deal. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to lose my finger. Like, um, I there was nothing that could console me. Like I just remember my mom was living with me at the time. Like I just remember like my mom trying to console me, and this is like my mom. Like my mom is supposed to fix everything, and like
Yeah.
just how empty like her hugs felt, and how scared I was that even my mom could not fix this, and how important my grandmother's hug was, and just realizing that, and her smell, and just to hear her, and like she was my security blanket my entire life. And to
Yeah.
not have that, she was the most stable thing in my life because she never moved. She always had the same phone number. She always had the same address. I moved a lot. And that was my only real sense of home, um, physically, and even like just like, you know, everything else. Like that was my mom, you know, like she was my mom too. Um,
She was your
so
tether.
yes, absolutely. So yeah, I lost it. I was scared. It was so bad. Like I wasn't sleeping. And I think like, you know, when people check on you, my experience was like, because I was so close to her, my cousins they didn't feel the same way. So they even came back and said, I don't really know what to do for you. Like I know you and grandma was really close. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And you know you know my dad and my aunts and uncles, they're from that generation where, you know, they don't really express their grief.
Yeah. You know, it's, you acknowledge that that it sucks, but you don't really
Hmm.
talk about it. You don't share. You don't
Hmm.
express it.
Yes, for sure. And so I thought I was gonna die. I was like, if I don't get help, this is not gonna work. Like I don't know what to do. I just was like really struggling. I'm struggling. I had really bad anxiety. Um, I had thrown myself into work, but it was kind of starting to, like, the walls were starting to close in on me. I was in a relationship and I was kind of like, you know, emotionally abusing my boyfriend, and you know I was just up and down. Like your emotions are up and down. Like the grief cycle is like here, there, you know, you go back, you know, your fear, anxiety,
Yeah.
acceptance, you're mad, you blame, guilt, you know, you're just all over the place. And I was in several grief cycles at the time. So I had been avoiding my past grief, and then everything was kind of catching up and hitting me at one time from different directions. And so, yeah, I was a mess. I was a mess. I was questioning everything. I questioned my existence. I questioned just everything. I didn't know if I was coming. I couldn't tell you if I was coming or going for sure.
Yeah.
And um, my boyfriend was like, "You should try Reiki. Your energy is really off." And I was like, I don't know what that is. But hospice at the time had also reached out to me for grief counseling. They'd asked me, would you be interested in that? And I was like, sure. I've always been a fan of therapy,
Yeah.
and so I ended up trying grief counseling first, and Reiki, and it just changed my life. And I just started trying different modalities, like anything that I could try to help me deal with everything. I was there. I tried grief counseling. I had the best counselor. His name was Kenji. I will never forget him. And he was amazing. And I met my Reiki master, Nancy, and we worked with each other for like a year. And it just helped me so much. I also tried like hypnotherapy. I
Hey,
wanted to like hypnotize me so that I don't, that I'm not crying every 5 minutes. Well, like, that's not what hypnotherapy is. I did find that out the hard way.
but look, but you're proving a point I've made before. I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do it when it comes to grief. I mean,
Yeah.
there are ways that are healthy versus ways that are not healthy, and it looks like you focused on ways that were healthy for you.
Yes. I think I was all out of options because when my uncle passed away, I was shopping, I was working, I binge drank, a lot of beer. I
Yeah.
was growing a beer belly. I even like picked up smoking cigarettes again for a brief time. Um, and I was just emotionally just like unavailable, available, unavailable, available. So it got to a place where like I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't avoid it anymore. And
Yeah.
expressing it, I didn't know how to express it the right way. And so I tried all those different modalities for like a good 8 months. So I was going to Reiki regularly. Um, I got offloaded with Kinji at grief counseling. Hypnotherapy was amazing. I started going to life coaches. They were amazing. And it really changed my life because not only did I learn how to process my grief, I found myself.
Yeah.
I found me. I found Brittany. I found not who I was, trying, who I thought I was supposed to be, showing up to be. I think that's just the most beautiful thing about, the path to spirituality, the path to enlightenment, and, just path of life. But is that we spend so much time kind of like reacting to life and just kind of roaming around trying to figure out this thing called life, with career and family and finding balance and still kind of focusing and figuring out yourself. And I was able to find that. And I think I often say like me losing my grandma was the worst and most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me because it forced me to look at myself. It forced me to face the darkness. It forced me to go through those really, really hard, dark parts and times in my life and really start over and rebuild and structure who I am today, who I wanted to be, and how I want to show up. And, like we mentioned earlier, like, how I can honor my grandmother the best way and share her journey and her life and her legacy. So for sure, it was a long thing. And at the end of it, I ended up deciding to become a Reiki practitioner, and I went to school to be a spiritual life coach. And I started the Full Embrace because I just found so much on how to process things. And even like with the grief journey, I didn't know much about grief. I
Yeah.
knew when people died, you went to a funeral, you buried them. In my culture, like just in the South, for a week or two, people check on you and then they kind of expect you to get over it.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's not realistic.
no. It and see that's a big part of why I wanted to do this is, you know, and maybe it is cultural. You and I are from the same state, different parts of the state, but same that Southern culture of I'm sorry for your loss. Let me know if you need anything, and that's about the most you get. You
Hmm.
know what I've found is, I mean, you just want to talk about the person, and so that's why I wanted to do this podcast. I wanted to be able to ask people, tell me about that person.
Hmm.
You know, who was the person that meant, and I'm so glad that people like you that are open and have a story to tell are willing to come on and talk about it. You know, yeah, I appreciate what you're doing and the fact that you are carrying that on, and it's very clear to me that you're honoring her.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity, and I have made it my mission to make grief the more comfortable and more available, like emotionally. And I have a Facebook group of on grief. I offer free grief support, and I definitely coach on grief as often or speak on it as often as I can, because you have, with anything, you have to process it. You have to
Yeah,
go through it. And um, one of the most important things that I learned during my grief journey is you are not going to be the same person, and being okay with that.
yeah,
And it's easy to say because I wanted to get back to the old Brittany, who I thought was my best self. And I never found her again, but I found the best version of myself. And I feel like you're going to go through so much. And I've experienced so much grief in my life. My grandmother is definitely a significant loss. But I've lost probably about 30 family members, probably
yeah.
more, but
Wow.
that's just what comes to mind. Gone to a lot of funerals, and just learning to go with the flow and finding the beauty in grief. Everything does happen for a reason, and everyone doesn't have the same reason. And if you're willing to look for it and be open to it, there's definitely beauty on the other side. Like, I lost my grandmother, but I've also gained a lot. And um, I feel like my grandmother is proud of me, and she's proud of her children, all a
Yeah.
million of us. And she lived a very long life. And I wish she was here, but we all have to go. And I grew up with her saying that we all have to go. And I will see her again. I will see
Yeah.
her again. I will, and I hope that she has those pancakes and those greens and all of the things, right? I just feel like it's going to be a feast. Like, just, I made all of your favorites, and I'm just going to be there. Just, even the non vegan stuff, it's still going to be vegan because it's not going to be like real. So,
It's you are so good at this. This is the second time you've given me the perfect segue. I always like to ask people, before we end, if you had a chance to have one last meal with her, what would you want that to be?
mm,
And I'll put the caveat on there for you. We'll assume any non-vegan ingredients are vegan, and it's a perfect one-to-one substitute. You don't have to put any kind of qualifiers on.
okay. I would say probably like some cube steak on some rice, like cube steak and gravy. When I
Yeah,
was not vegan, I used to make cube steak really good, like she did. And like with some greens on the side and cornbread and a slice of vanilla cake with chocolate icing.
that does sound pretty good.
Yes.
I want to
Yes.
thank you thank you so much for sharing and for talking with me.
Yes, this has been amazing. I am like, it's very healing.
I
And go ahead.
I have found that it's not always the most comfortable, but that getting a chance to talk about those people, it does so much for you.
For sure. It definitely does. I also like want to encourage anyone who watches this podcast to just know that it didn't, it took me time to be able to talk about my grandmother this way. And, I have my good days and I have my bad days. Grief is always going to be there. It doesn't go away. You don't get over grief. It's not something that you get over. It's not something, you learn to live with it. And, my grief just has some glitter on it and a couple of rhinestones. And, I make it work, I make it work for me. And that's what, that's what you have to do, and take your time, because you're not going to get a vision for how you define your grief overnight.
I love the way you phrase that.
So yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew.
You're welcome. I appreciate you coming on. Before we end though, would you mind? I always like to give people a chance to promote the stuff that they're working on, and I know you're very passionate about the full embrace and the what it can do for people. So if you want to take a moment to promote all of your
Sure.
things.
Sure. So I am the owner of the healing platform, The Full Embrace, and it has several different legs for healing. We believe that healing should be natural, and sustainable. So everything that we use is sustainable, from our packaging, and everything is natural, organic, obviously vegan. But we offer services like spiritual life coaching, Reiki. I also teach spirituality workshops and classes. I also speak on spirituality. So if anyone wants me to speak on things, I speak on self love. My focus areas are self love, grief, healing childhood trauma, and relationship trauma. And I also offer these meditation or mala beads. These are handmade,
Oh
and
wow,
I use gemstones, real natural gemstones, to make them. So they have like their own healing properties and own intentions. And I actually started making these when my grandmother passed, to help me with my anxiety. So I have 4 different lines of these. I also offer natural skincare, and I just launched last September my own herbal tea collection. It's called the Chakra Tea, and it's 7 different herbal teas, and it's definitely geared towards healing the body naturally. And so it touches on everything you can think of, from your physical, your mental, and your spiritual sides.
that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna link to all of that in the show notes. So for anyone listening, if you want to learn more, find out more, you'll be able to click on those links and go check all of that out.
Awesome. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you again to Coach B for joining me today and sharing her story. And thank you, the listener, for coming this far. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate people taking the time to listen to these stories and hopefully connect with them. You can learn more about Coach B's work at thefullembrace.com or on social media at The Full Embrace. I will link to both in the show notes, so please go out there and check those out. You may also subscribe to Our Last Meal wherever you're listening. And I also ask you, please take the time to rate and review. Anytime you do that, that helps me out, and it just helps to hopefully get the show in front of more people. I'd also love if you would follow Our Last Meal on social media at Our Last Meal Pod, or visit ourlastmeal.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out by clicking the Share Your Story button at the top of the page. I've actually got a couple episodes I'm working on now. with folks that have reached out that way, so I would love to talk with you. I'm really excited for the next episode. I don't want to go into specifics yet, but it is one that I've been looking forward to for a while. I'm also looking forward to the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. May 16th of 2022 was my first episode. So coming up in a few weeks, I'm going to have the 1-year anniversary, and I'm still trying to decide what to do for that. But the fact that it's come this far is just amazing to me. And so I'm appreciative of anyone who's listened to one episode, every episode, 5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever you've put in. Thank you. I'll see you in a couple weeks.